In a world filled with information, where do you turn to get straight talk about retirement, investments, and your money? Lock it in to the longest-running financial talk show in Arkansas, and let us help you build the bridge between information and application. Real financial change begins right here, and it starts with you.
It's showtime!
On today's show, we're focusing on small business owners, the impact of the pandemic, and what the future holds. But even if you're not a small business owner, there is application for you because you are the CEO of your finances. Stay tuned.
This is the Get Ready for the Future show.
And we welcome you in on live stream on Facebook and on YouTube and on the radio side. This is the Get Ready for the Future show for the first week in July. My name is Scott Inman, John Shrewsbury, and Janet Walker to my right. Good morning to you both.
Good morning, sir.
And Candace Stanley to my left, who
Good morning.
moved me out of my favorite chair and over to this side. There's a reason for that. We'll get to that. We have a special guest in today's program, but we are focusing on small business. And I think first and foremost, let's start here. We are in now the second half of 2020. So it's a good divider to say, hey, the first half of the year is over. And I think we're all happy about that. And for the collective health of our nation and the economic health of our nation, we certainly hope that the back half of 2020 is much better than the front half. Would you agree?
Well, I would say that it can't get any worse, but as sure as I say that, it would.
Yeah.
And so I'm
All you have to do is read the news or social media and see what's coming next, right?
Of course, because they're all correct, obviously,
Yes.
obviously. But yeah, it has been strange. We've been through all kinds of machinations of different stuff here at GenWealth, and we're going to explore kind of all the changes that have been wrought upon us over the last 6 months or so, and how you can kind of adapt and deal with that as we get into the program today.
I want to say, too, as we mentioned in the open there, if you are not a small business owner, don't turn us off, because I think there's a lot of application here as I look through our content today that applies not only to small business owners, but to you, as I said, the CEO of your finances. So you are in charge of your own money, and I think this conversation is really going to be beneficial for you too.
Look, it's not just the small business owner that has had to deal with change. It is everybody that has had to deal with change, and that's really what we're talking about today, Janet, is how you deal with change, because one day everything was going great, and then another day came along and we were looking at each other going, okay, now what? How do we deal with this? Because now we're in the midst of a pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, it is an understatement to say that 2020 has been full of change and unexpected change. I've seen all kinds of really funny little memes that people have put on Facebook about, these are the things that we've been through, and then what are you, jokingly, what are you predicting for July? Whether it's like flame-throwing dragons or, whatever it is.
Level 7 of Jumanji.
Yeah, just all of these just hilarious things. But frankly, when you look back, what's on the list that we would not have predicted? Oh, pretty much everything. Yeah. So the point is, you got to be flexible. You just got to learn to roll with it, because life is not going to be easy. There are a lot of challenges for us, regardless of where you are career-wise, whether you're a business owner or not. There are a lot of challenges in front of you. How do you deal with that?
So here are the numbers. 30.2 million small businesses in the U.S., making up a whopping 99.9% of all U.S. businesses and nearly 50% of the workforce. So you think small business is sort of important to this country? Those numbers are really amazing to listen to. Nearly 7.5 million small businesses may be at risk of closing permanently over the coming 5 months, and 3.5 million are at risk of closure in the next 2 months. I remember there were several restaurants, like just weeks after the shutdown, that said, we're not coming back. I mean, they knew that they were not going to be able to either make their rent payments on their building or whatever the case may be, and they didn't have the cash on the sidelines to do it, so they were out. And as it has prolonged, even though we are starting back up, not being at full capacity still hurts a lot of small businesses.
Yeah, there's a couple of things about this that I think are important. Number one is, for the first time that I know of, there were large lump sums of money offered by the federal government, and essentially they're saying, come get it and use it like we want you to, and it'll be free. and never has that happened that I'm aware of in the history of the federal government. That's number one. But secondly, I think it's interesting to see how business has adopted and adapted to this situation. I was talking with a restaurant owner the other day. I went to lunch, and he came by the table, and we were chatting. And he ended up having to lay off 30 employees from his restaurant. He says, hardest thing I've ever had to do. But he said, do you know that we're actually we made some changes in how we are handling our menus and all that and our service. And we are actually more profitable today than we were prior to the pandemic going into place.
I think that flexibility of being able to adapt has been critical for those who've been able to stay in business, and has been probably the missing link for many who were not able to stay in business. I think about there's a gas station in Benton that they were going through a remodel right when this hit. Well, what this tells me from the outside is that they had the money set aside for the remodel and to be closed during that period of time, but then they couldn't reopen when they had anticipated reopening, and they're out of business now. They're done permanently. And you think about how many businesses didn't have the business version of an emergency fund to be able to bridge that gap.
Yeah,
Candace?
I was watching the news, I think it was this morning, and they had a business owner on there from New Jersey. And as they started to open back up, then they started seeing a spike. And so now they've started to close back up. And this particular business owner had brought 12 employees back that he had previously furloughed. And now he was going to have to tell those folks that he had brought back, now half of y'all are going to have to go back home. So he was going to have to let go of 6. So 6 of those people were laid off, came back, and now they're getting laid off again. I mean, it's a scary thing when you don't know and everything's confusing and it changes day to day.
I took my wife recently to a primary care physician too, and that's the first time I had been into that setting. And they've obviously closed the waiting rooms, and you're waiting outside for them to come and get you. And the traffic is lower, but I was asking them about their experience, and they had to furlough half of their workforce initially, but half of the staff or the team stayed in place, but they really weren't meeting with anybody face to face. During the shutdown, they started doing a lot of telemedicine or telehealth.
Right.
And I think technology has played a role in the way the adapting has taken place for small business too. And when we did a show a few weeks ago about the new normal, and we really don't want to go to a new normal. We like the way things were, but that's the thing that I think will be a new normal. Businesses finding out how they can operate in a different, more leaner, or more technological way. Yeah,
the technology is a huge role in that, and there are a lot of other changes that businesses have dealt with. And I think where you're seeing two things that are changing here. Number one is the adaptation and not going back to the old way of doing it, because now there's a more efficient way to do it. And that's a positive change. Another positive change is that a lot of business owners and a lot of people in their personal finances are going, never again am I going to get caught with my proverbial pants down and not be ready for something like this to come along. And what does that mean? That means that you maybe don't run as fast as you did before. Maybe you're not running at full employee capacity. Maybe you hold back a little bit on adding that extra person or something like that. You always think about having an emergency fund and having a business emergency fund. But I think the theme that we hear time and time and time again from people who have been through this and struggled with it and now are trying to get back on their feet, they're going, okay, next time it's going to be different. Never again am I going to be in a situation where this is going to derail the process by which I make my living and the process by which the people on my team make a living. And that's a big deal. A lot of times business owners don't get the credit for all the pain that they go through when they have to do something like lay off 30 employees.
Think about the application there if you're not a small business owner. I'm hearing what you're saying there. If you're the CEO of your own retirement, your own finances, what did you realize you could do without during this time? It was pretty easy to figure that out when you weren't able to spend your money on things you were used to spending your money on. So tightening that belt and seeing where you can eliminate waste in your own personal economy, certainly very applicable there. We're going to be joined by Bob Paine after the commercial break. Bob is a franchise owner in Central Arkansas to talk more about how COVID-19 has changed small business. Back in a minute.
so you'll have more stuff that you can get.
So, would you rather spend money or save money? You'd rather save money?
Yeah, I would get $1 and $1 after 2 days.
Do you know what a credit card is?
Yes.
What's a credit card?
Something that has money on it. And if you cash it in, you can pay with it.
But how does the money get on the credit card?
Bill Gates.
What about a car? How much money do you think it takes to buy a car?
100.
So for $100, what would your car look like?
A pink car that has glitter all over it.
So if I gave you what would you buy with it?
Maybe a car. 2, 3 houses. 100 wood. 2,000 toys. And infinity couches.
What do you think a 401k is?
A candy bar.
Okay, a wafer with chocolate syrup on top and then caramel on top and then chocolate chips.
Would you cover it in chocolate?
Yeah.
Tell me everything you know about money.
That it costs a lot and that people get only a few things. And if you save money, you can get stuff that you need.
Did you know there are a ton of financial resources on GetReadyForTheFuture.com? No? Well, bookmark that page for later because the Get Ready for the Future show is back.
Live streaming, as always, 11:30 every Wednesday on Facebook and on YouTube. And if you want to weigh in today on our topic of how COVID-19 has changed small business, feel free to do that. Just put it in the comments section of Facebook Live. And do want to take a quick moment to say thanks to all of you who took advantage of our no-cost financial planning that we started way back in April 15th, and it expired just yesterday as we record the show July 1st. So we are out of that window now, but we are still meeting with clients. We are doing that both face-to-face and video conferencing. So whatever you're more comfortable with, as we still are in the middle of the pandemic, we can certainly set that up for you. You can call 501-653-7355 to begin the planning process going through the Gen Wealth Ready to Retire process. We are pleased to be joined today by Bob Paine. Bob is an owner-operator of Chick-Fil-A on Cantrell, and good morning, and thanks for joining us. Appreciate you being here.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, so we are talking about how COVID-19 has changed small business. We set the show up just in the last segment there, and obviously there's been a lot to overcome in the last few months. So I guess let's just start very generally. How are you doing?
Oh, well, thanks. We're doing fine. It's been a pretty wild time.
Yeah.
But we've persevered, worked together as a team, and I think we're doing really well.
So what has been the biggest impact that you've seen on your business?
Yeah, I would say it has caused us to learn some new leadership principles.
Really?
To exercise some leadership muscle that really we didn't have to use previous to COVID. And so whether it's been learning how to be more flexible, learning how to be more imaginative in how we approach business, learning how to change our processes on the fly, just been a number of things where our leadership, and I'm not talking me, I'm really talking the folks that work for me that are on the front lines, right in the face of the customer every day. They have really had to learn how to do things on the fly, do things quickly, and so it's caused them to grow up in many ways.
Let me ask you kind of a follow-up on that, Bob. I know that you and I have talked a lot in the past that you, prior to COVID-19, have been a very present owner-operator, there pretty much all the time. And now that has been a family choice for you to not be present just because of the risk to you health-wise. And so I think about that as an owner of a business and go, okay, I was there all the time. Now I'm not there. And that makes me feel very, concerned and nervous, et cetera, about, just my role as an owner. Tell us about that process and how that developed with you and the other leadership that's there.
So I have had to take a step back physically due to my age, as well as I do have an underlying health condition that would create a real problem for us. And so both my family and some of my leadership came to me quickly after COVID started and said, you need to stay home. And so I've learned the difference between being present physically, but also being able to be present when you're not there physically.
That's great. Yeah.
There are so many ways now with all the technology we have now. And so I've learned I've learned how to make videos on Vimeo and that kind of thing, which wasn't the kind of thing that I enjoy doing. It still isn't.
I'm with you there.
But nonetheless, it's been a learning curve for all of us.
Yeah.
And so there are ways to be present and involved in the business, even though I can't be there physically.
That's great.
We had to deal with that to some degree as well, because we made the choice to shut our doors to the public for a period of time and send all of our advisors home. And we had a skeleton crew basically answering the phones here at the office. But it felt like I was in outer space, quite frankly. And I don't know if you went through that. And I know that there's a lot just in your brain that you go through of going, now I don't have the ability to put my hands on my business and be 100% in control. Was that a factor for you?
Very much so. And there was a learning process there and a process just of learning to get comfortable with that new way of leading. It really goes back to, do you trust your team or not?
Yeah.
And fortunately, I have a team that I feel I can trust. And so that made it a little easier. If I wasn't able to trust my team, it would have been a real problem. But absolutely. But, on the other end of the spectrum, you sent your people home. We weren't able to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest challenges I think we had at first, in the first couple, 3 weeks of the whole thing, is that I had some employees say, well, wait a minute, why are we still working if it's so dangerous? Mm-hmm. And so we had to work through that whole process of people need a place to eat. I was in touch with one of the supervisors of one of the bigger grocery store chains close to our store, and he said, we can't keep food on the shelf. People have to have a place to go to eat. And so there was this thing about learning to serve the community. We took a lot of steps to try to keep our team safe, and still are. And so we had to work through that process of, why are we working when everybody else is not?
Yeah.
And that was a big deal for us.
And I can relate to that personally. My son, Garrett, who you probably don't even know this, he works at the Chick-Fil-A in Bryant.
Oh, cool.
So he has been
Why
doing that.
there?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. We may work a transfer out during today's show, but he obviously, seeing him go to work as a father and knowing he has to go and do that as well. But let's talk a little bit about operationally how things changed as well. You mentioned you had to stay open. I noticed the difference in that when it comes to seeing Garrett come home he has this nice tan line around his mask, right?
Yeah.
Because
Face
A,
to
he's
face.
outside every day, and B,
Yeah.
he's wearing a mask. So those are two ways that things have changed. You didn't change your product line like a lot of
Didn't change
small
the product
businesses had
line,
to do, but the dining
but
room's
had to
been
change the
closed.
processes really fast. You know, when we closed the dining rooms, I still remember that was March 20th, and that's 40% of our business. So I know a lot of businesses have lost a lot more than that, but that was a big chunk. In the first 2, 3, 4 weeks after that happened, we dropped dramatically. And yet we started seeing pretty quickly, okay, demand's picking up, the lines are getting long, we need to do something different outside. And so, I mean, your operator has been one of the leaders in some of that and what they're doing outside in the parking lot. But, you know, we've added additional drive-through lanes in a parking lot that's really meant for people to park in, not to be driving through. And so just, again, adapting to something that we need to do differently in order to take advantage of the opportunities that we were being given.
Obviously, you didn't see the pandemic coming. No one did. But what has it taught you that you need to be more prepared for the next time we have a black swan type event?
I think there needs to be some margin. Whether that's in our staffing, do we have enough leaders that can lead every day in a normal course of business, but do we also have enough for whatever opportunities or whatever challenges that we're going to be facing down the road? Do we have enough margin in our personal lives? Do we have, you guys were talking earlier in the first segment about margin financially,
Right.
both personally and in business. Do we have margin there that will tide us over during those difficult times? So I think margin's a very important element, and it has a lot of applications.
I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, really, to apply it to across all those different areas. Margin is a good word for that. Bob, if you had to name just one or two things, what would you say has been most helpful to you in running your business during this time?
Talking to others that have some wisdom that I can learn from. I remember you and I, Janet, early on, we were both working on a similar project, and we traded a number of phone calls and text messages and kind of picked each other's brains.
We did.
And I've had other people I can do that with, and it's just all of us are in a fog.
Yeah.
We've never experienced this before, so there's not a textbook somewhere that we can go and look up, okay, what's the manual for this?
Right.
And so talking to people that you trust and you think have some wisdom and are trying to work through the same issues that you're trying to work through.
Yeah.
So
and I'll echo the benefit that I had from those conversations too. That I think there's a lot to camaraderie, companionship, that type of thing. That
Absolutely.
Hey, we're not in the exact same situation, but this is business owner to business owner. Of man, we got a whole lot more questions than we got answers. What are you doing about this? And maybe there's one area where you're ahead of where we are, and there's another area where we're ahead. And just to be able to share that back and forth was tremendously beneficial, I think, for both of us.
And I think also just trying to be able to make decisions quickly. You know, it was a time early on just to kind of throw a bunch of stuff up on the wall and see what sticks.
Yep.
And try something, and hey, if it doesn't work, okay, fine, move on to the next thing. But we had to try new things, and some of them have stuck, some of them haven't. So.
Well, I know your team actually began to write encouraging notes to people on the to-go bags.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of a real novel thing, and it really does epitomize, how people have come together to fight this thing in one way, shape, form, or fashion. What else did your team do that surprised you in this?
Well, I think several things. We've had some people really step up in terms of being an encouragement to the team. Mm-hmm. Everybody needs to be encouraged.
Sure.
And so we've had, especially I can think of 2 or 3 of the gals, they tend to be better on encouragement than we guys do sometimes. They've just really stepped up and been a source of encouragement. We've tried to be involved in the community. We've given away a couple thousand box lunches to various areas over the last couple months. Mm-hmm. I've worked with a local church and distribution of those. So there's been some things both internally and externally, but just that day-to-day pat on the back is just so
it's
valuable.
huge. Mm-hmm.
We've only got a couple of seconds left here, but I do want to end the conversation with asking what long-term effects, long-term changes in the restaurant industry do you see?
So I think the pandemic's been an accelerator, and by that I mean it's accelerated things that were going to happen anyway, such as the restaurant industry is moving toward delivering meals where people want them to be delivered. Third-party delivery services is an example of that. Curbside delivery at our parking lot is an example of that. And so people are wanting to have their meals, but not necessarily wanting to visit us in our dining room. And curbside, as an example, has grown by about 1,000% during this time for us.
Wow.
Third-party delivery hasn't grown by that much, but it's grown substantially. So I think it's been an accelerator of those kinds of things. That's probably the biggest change. And that, unfortunately, I think, as you guys mentioned too, again, earlier in the segment, that there are going to be some that just aren't able to come back, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Bob, we'll leave it there. We're out of time, but thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah,
it's been
thank
fun.
you.
Yes, Bob Paine, the owner-operator of Chick-Fil-A on Cantrell, as we continue to talk about how COVID-19 has changed small business. We're back in a moment.
At GenWealth, one of our standards is that we value good communication. One of my favorite quotes about good communication is from George Bernard Shaw. He said, "The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. If you ever doubt that, come to my house, listen to my 16-year-old son and my 13-year-old daughter having a conversation, and see what happens, because they will walk away with completely different understandings of the conversation that has occurred." It happens every time. It's okay, they're still learning communication. But here at GenWealth, we believe that that's something you need to experience every time you walk in our door, that you need to feel understood, that you need to feel listened to. So you'll see a change in how we're even communicating. If you're talking about something that's very serious, very personal, you'll even hear a change in our tone of voice, because that's just how good communication is supposed to be. But it also means that we can feed back to you what you've shared with us, just so you know that we're listening. We value good communication.
Education-driven, strategy-based, team-delivered. That's how we roll on the Get Ready for the Future show, and we're back for more.
Our thanks again to Bob Paine, the owner-operator of Chick-Fil-A on Cantrell, for joining us in today's show as we talk about how COVID-19 has changed small business. And the application, maybe some help for small business owners, but also for you as the CEO of your retirement or the CEO of your finances. And I do want to take a minute, too. Back in the first segment, and I think even in the second segment, we made reference to the new normal that everyone uses that term, and I'm not particularly fond of, but there are things that will never go back to normal, and we did do a whole show on that a few weeks ago, and we referenced that, but we didn't tell you how to get it. If you haven't been following us and checking out our podcast on iTunes or Stitcher, be sure to do that and find any past Get Ready for the Future show, including this one, once it has aired and cleared through our compliance department. So as we talk about how small business owners can continue to run things through COVID-19 and beyond, we've got some tips here, some things to maybe consider as you work through the challenges that we still face. And even though we are starting to open back up and many businesses are are going strong, as Bob's is at the Chick-fil-A on Cantrell. There are things, of course, that are still going to be turbulence ahead for sure in the future. And our top tip here is don't leave your team members isolated. You know, I thought Bob's first response, in fact, was how we've had to find different ways to lead. Leadership has been challenged and adapted and I think when it comes to leadership, that's a big part of a small business owner's role. And really, you're more situated to accomplish that, to keep your team members plugged in when you are a small business owner. It becomes that's one of the things people probably don't like about working for big corporations. They don't get the communication or the touch or the feel that they need from their ownership. And I think that's one of the things that can really make a difference in how things run.
Yeah, clearly that does make a difference because like here in the Bryant office of GenWealth, I do what I call manage by walking around. I go around and sit down, talk to people and see what's going on and stay plugged in, talking about either cases that we're working on for clients or a situation that we may be working on in service or maybe something at the front desk. That's the way we stayed plugged in. And so when everybody was home and everybody was scattered, that made that way more difficult.
It did, but we overcame that. One of the points, this is not even on, kind of what we were thinking about ahead of time, but another note I made while Bob was talking was face your fears. As a business owner, face your fears. And whether it is, look, I've always led in this way, I've managed in this style, and I can't do that now, so what do I do? Or if it was for us, hey, we've had appointments in person, and we can't do that now. And for Bob and Chick-fil-A, it was we've had people, coming in to eat, and now they can't do that. So what do we do? And there's just this massive amount of forced change. Yeah. Change is never easy or fun anyway, but when it's forced, it takes it to a whole new realm. And I think we as business owners just have to go, all right, I cannot control the fact that has changed. What can I control? How do we respond to that? And that's what we can control. We can control that, okay, we're going to manage differently. We're going to, quote unquote, meet with clients differently. We weren't meeting with them physically anymore for a period of time. We were doing it by video, but we adapted. So how do you be flexible? I think you've got to learn to adapt, whether it's for coronavirus or just whatever.
I think we did a good job of preparing for this even pre-COVID, though, because we have offices that are not all close together.
Right.
So we are kind of used to doing virtual meetings and things like that and keeping in touch with those offices that are away from the Bryant. And so we just kind of had to up that a little bit when even our Bryant location was home working and staying connected. And then, we added some meetings to where we were making sure to check in, and I think that helped us through that a lot. I
think we made it a point early on to reach out to our clients during our downtime.
Yep.
So I guess maybe there's a couple of different points here. One is if you do have more idle time because you're not as busy, fill that up with something useful, and we did that by checking in with our clients. But going back to the communication with the client, I think that's important, an important takeaway as you take these small business owner tips and apply them if you're not a small business owner, is communication is very important with your finances, with your advisor, with your banker, or whoever you need to deal with. If they're not communicating with you, you can feel very isolated.
You can, and we did, as Candace said, reach out to folks and try to do that on a real regular basis, both clients and our team members. But also, I think you have to be real direct with them. We had a lot of stuff going on. During this time, in our industry, we had the market going to heck in a handcart. It was like it was the biggest straight down drop that we'd ever seen in the market, and way worse than, way bigger than what we saw in the financial crisis in a very short period of time. So we're scrambling, trying to figure that out, make sure we understand what's happening, make sure we understand, okay, is this going to be short-lived or long-lived, or what are we doing here? And so the key here is that you've got to be honest with people, and not honest to say, everything's everything's going to be okay. That's not really necessarily the case, and certainly not gloom and doom, because that's never the case. As we live by here at Genwealth, things are never as bad or as good as you think they are, and so you've got to be middle of the road somewhere in that. And I think you also have to be very direct with your employees if you're facing financial challenges, if you're facing survivability challenges. We didn't face survivability challenges, but we were concerned about where the finances were going to go potentially if the market had stayed down.
Well, and one of the things we learned in that, John, is that even though we knew that we weren't sending anybody home because we knew what the books looked like, and we made some reasonable assumptions in this process, and we're not going to have to send anybody home, so this is the reality of Genwealth, we're okay. The reality, though, for our team members is that they didn't know that. Unless we came out and told them we're not sending anybody home, they didn't know. And so there was a small number of team members who were concerned just because they were hearing about friends who had a job somewhere for 15 years and then they were furloughed or they were laid off. And so you begin to just think those things, whether there's any base in reality at your employer or not, you begin to think those things. So what that taught us is, even if the news is good news, even if it's, hey, we're not going to have to lay anybody off, we need to be intentional about sharing that.
So let's go back to this adage that that Dave Ramsey talks about, is that when you were growing up, your parents didn't talk about money or didn't talk about sex because you didn't think it all happened. They didn't have either one of them, and it turns out they had both.
Right.
And so I think that there is this almost phobia about talking about money in your personal finances with your family. If you know you're going to be okay, talk about it. If you know you're going to have problems, talk about it, but at least get it out, and don't let that fear of the unknown fester in the minds of the people that are closest to you, because that cannot lead to anything positive. It can only lead to problems.
And maybe you need an unbiased approach, a third party to look at that.
That's right.
Because when you say, and you say this often, and I totally agree with it, that things are rarely as bad or as good as they seem. That works for your assessment, but I also think the solution is in the middle too. It's rarely on the extreme, and when you're emotionally tied to your finances, whether it's small business or personal, I think you can really get caught into this box of thinking one way or the other, like totally ignorant to anything's wrong, that you are really doing very well and you may not be, or the reverse could be true too, that you may need to have a lot of work to do, or you think you have more work to do than you actually do.
Candace, you and I have worked with folks that, if they are making decisions in a vacuum, then they oftentimes make decisions that hurt them when they maybe didn't have to.
Yeah, and that's when, having an advisor, that third party, that objective voice, because your emotion is tied to your money, to your business, whatever it is, it's great to have somebody on the outside say, let's apply some logic here.
And small business owners don't go it alone, right? You guys don't go it alone.
No.
You've got a team of experts around you to help you do what you need to do, and the same is true in your personal finances.
Scott, let me pick up on that just a moment, on small business owners having a team around us, because I think both with Bob Paine as an owner-operator of Chick-Fil-A and with us as, yes, we own Genwealth, but we are tied to LPL, and we have the ability to reach out to them. In both cases, we're talking about small business owners who have a connection with a much larger corporation and therefore a clear line of help, if you will. And I would just say to those of you who are out there and you don't have that, like your small business is it. There is nobody that you can go call on a 1-800 number and get help on your question. You need to find who those people are in your world. It may not be a 1-800 number for a larger corporation, but you've got to be able to have people to reach out to.
It may just be a mentor, somebody that that has taken those steps before you.
Right.
Well, and I'll have to say, and Bob alluded to this, and we do this here at Genwealth. We have an internal leadership team. That leadership team doesn't make the final decisions about the company, but they advise Janet and Kimmy and I on what the situation is, and we have a sounding board that we can run things past them and help and both both of you have sat, Scott currently sits on that board, and Candace has sat on that board in the past. We have a rotating advisor position, but that is invaluable to Janet and I because we allow them to speak into our business lives and say, hey, this is how we think about this. And oftentimes we're thinking, let's go this direction. We talk to the leadership team, we consider their opinions, and we end up doing something completely different because of their counsel and input.
We only got about a minute left in this segment, but we'll get started with our next point to run your business through COVID-19 and beyond is get prepared. This may be the first recession you've owned a business through, but it certainly won't be the last. You referenced the black swan events. Those things come and disrupt things. It's certainly going to happen again. So if you have the ability, start managing your business finances like you would your own. And I think that's a really helpful thing because if you attach the personal nature of that to the business itself, and that's hard to do. I would imagine for both of you, it's very hard to do sometimes, but it certainly can be helpful.
Well, if you think about, we've referenced Dave Ramsey before, and we all know that he is the king of not being in debt and having an emergency fund. He recently said on his show during COVID-19 that they have never gotten to the point where they have 6 months of expenses in their bank account to deal with an emergency. And when you think about the rapid growth of Dave Ramsey's organization, it's huge when you think about how much money that could possibly be.
We'll pick up on that after the break.
The beauty of a potter's work is that each item is unique. No piece is the same. That's what makes it art. At Gen Wealth, we believe your financial plan should be unique to you. Through our process, your money is carefully shaped around your goals and dreams. Your future, artfully crafted. Call us today or visit our website and connect with us. Gen Wealth Financial Advisors.
There's always been power in standing up for what you believe in, challenging the status quo, and never accepting the ordinary. What about the rest of your life? Will you settle? Or will your retirement be more? More fun, more family than finances, more than just investments. Connect with us at Gen Wealth and harness the power of more.
Back with more straight talk about retirement, investments, and your money on the Get Ready for the Future show.
Our final segment this morning, the Get Ready for the Future show, available on radio on Saturday mornings and live streaming every Wednesday morning at 11:30 on Facebook Live and on YouTube. And if you are watching this morning, feel free to comment and give us your thoughts as we talk about running a small business through COVID-19 and beyond. We've got some practical applications for small business owners this morning, and we also think that they translate very well to you in your personal finances as you get prepared for the future. So get prepared was the last item that we talked about. We were a little abruptly interrupted by the commercial break, so I want to go back to that. But talking about running your business a little more like you manage your own personal finances, and of course these need to match up because maybe a small business owner does lack the personal financial order as well. But the things that we talk about on this show week in and week out, and it's increasing cash flow by limiting expenses. Have an emergency fund. I started the show by talking about how many restaurants were saying they weren't coming back 3 or 4 weeks into the shutdown. They needed a pile of cash to be able to get through the turmoil for a little while. That's how an emergency fund can certainly help out, and paying off debt. All three big things, both personally and as a business owner.
I think that debt is huge.
Yeah.
So that is an anchor. It's kind of like going into retirement with student loans, having a business where you need an employee and you got to pay them, but you've got this debt,
I mean, it goes back to the verse in Proverbs that says the borrower will be slave to the lender. If you're enslaved, you don't have the freedom to do the other things that you want to do, and in this case, maybe even need to do. If that debt is weighing you down, you don't have that flexibility. I want to circle back, guys, to what John was saying before the break. He was talking about Dave Ramsey's organization, and they teach, to have the 3 to 6 months of emergency savings for you to have your expenses for 3 to 6 months of time. They teach that on a personal basis and on a business basis, but Dave says that they've never reached that goal as a business. But the reason, and we didn't have time to get to this, the reason is that their expenses, they're constantly growing, and so their expenses are constantly increasing. And so if they had to shut off all forms of income, all revenue sources, they don't have that 6-month fully funded emergency fund. And I think that's very common for a lot of businesses. But the question is, do you have to shut off all forms of revenue? And Bob and I talked about that a good bit when we were in the early stages of this, that our businesses are very different in a few ways. And one is that, like, for us, we have some recurring revenue where they do not. It's people buy food today or they do not buy food today. But on the side where they're at an advantage is they know at the end of the day, here's the revenue that we brought in today, and here are our expenses. And not that they close out the books like that simply, every day, but you understand what I'm saying, where for us, that business cycle is very elongated. We might meet with somebody in January and not finalize everything until March, and then the company might not get paid until April. And so that elongated cycle has an impact on how you deal with things like this, because when restaurants were feeling the impact immediately of not being able to have people in their dining room, we were like, oh, this was a good pay cycle, but it was a pay cycle from work that we did in January.
Right.
Yeah. I think the big takeaway that you've got to think about in this is that most people live with their personal finances and their business finances as if everything is going to go right. Now, we're all kind of optimistic at heart, and we think that, everything's going to work out, and I've got this all planned out and everything. I think we had a big wake-up call that things don't always go right. And I think if you're honest with yourself, you know that in your personal finances, you know that in your business finances. And so you've got to do what Bob talked about doing, and that is create margin. Margin is just like the margin on the paper. You don't write all the way to the edge of the paper. You have some margin there so you can actually see what's going on and have some room to jot a note if you needed to or what have you. That's why you do margin in your business. You've got to have some relief if things don't always go right. And the question is, how big is your margin going to be? We would love to have 6 months expenses in savings. We haven't gotten there. Dave Ramsey hadn't gotten there. I don't know if it's a valid goal to have 6 months for a business or not, but it's certainly possible to have 3 months.
I think that goes back to the psychological nature of all of this. You said we all are optimistic by nature. We want to think about the good times. We want to think about the good things happening and things that money can do for us that we will enjoy.
Right.
But this has all taught us that sometimes things are not going to go well, and when they don't, it can look really bad. So when you say margin, I think of the line on the page. You really have to just find some lines. What amount do you need? The number. Put it on paper on purpose, and you don't go below that number. I mean, that's really the only way you can fight the psychology of it, I think.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Well, Candace has been a business owner, and I think you can attest that there's always going to be something.
Yeah.
Always. Things that you don't expect. Thank goodness I'm still not a business owner because I don't have that overhead. I didn't have to worry about that this time. But I did enjoy having my own business, and we actually had 2 at one time. My husband had one at home as well that he did. He did building rifles on the side there, but he's also in the military. So we were fortunate this time around to be essential, both of us. And then, I was in the insurance business before. So I've talked with some of those guys back from my past life in insurance, and they seem to be doing well and still doing okay. I know a lot of those companies like the major insurance companies were doing things to help those customers with their bills and things like that if they were having issues due to COVID-19 and being able to pay those bills. So those are all helpful, and to help because a lot of Allstate and State Farm and Farm Bureau, a lot of those are pretty much small businesses. People don't know that. And so to have those insurance companies help them from a business owner standpoint as well as their customers was super good for them.
Our last tip or suggestion for small business owners getting through COVID-19 is the biggest one, I think, and it's take care of yourself. I think a good small business owner cares about their team and almost considers them family. And that can really drag owners down when you think about your team or your family hurting. So you have to be able to take care of yourself to be able to stand through all of that.
I think this is a place where if you're married, your spouse plays a critical role they know what your limits are, and they know when you're close to it, when you don't have a clue yet, and you need to be listening to that voice. And if you have a voice at work, if you've got another owner of the business, if you've got just even if it's somebody who, they're working for you, you're managing them, but many times they know you so well that they can speak that truth into your life. I think you've got to be willing to listen, and sometimes the best thing you can do is take a little bit of time off. I remember a friend of mine years ago, he said, "Janet, sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is take a nap." And I thought, I'm going to just sit and let the wisdom in that soak in, because the challenge of being a business owner is that we've got the weight of the world, it feels like, on our shoulders, and all of it's personal because we care about our people, we love them, we want what's best for them, whether we're talking about our team or our clients. If you're really doing what you're passionate about, then, that tells you you're passionate about it, and so it's a big deal. But you can't keep doing it without taking care of yourself.
I would say that there are a couple things that you can do from a positive basis to keep your mind where it needs to be. There are really only a couple of things that you are in control of in any business. I don't care what it is, this business, another business, whatever. And that is your attitude and your effort. If you keep your attitude right and you keep your effort right, whatever challenge that comes your way will likely fade. Now, this one has hung on for a while and seems to be trying to make a comeback. But again, that's where you have to stress, I'm going to have the right attitude. I'm going to have the right effort. When we talked with Bob, they all got to work. They all got busy innovating and things of that nature. That's clearly the way that you survive something like this. You cannot be a victim. You have to be a victor.
That's a word we haven't used, resolve, because that's what that is. You have to be resolved that this is not going to beat you, that you're going to get through this. And we certainly hope that today's program has helped you if you're a small business owner, or even if you're not, if this is just something you can apply to your personal finances. As we get set to wrap up, I am waiting on the bell. And the bell, there it is. Okay.
Delayed.
We have a certain time that the bell is supposed to ring, and it didn't ring at a certain time. So I was waiting for that to happen. Thanks, Casey, for ringing the bell. So time for final thoughts.
I didn't call you out, Casey. It wasn't me.
Yes. You just left me hanging. That's all right. My big takeaway is really what we just talked about a moment ago, the margin, the word margin, creating it both in your personal life and in your financial life. I think those are both very important. And I really think we struck on something there, that it has to just be a line in the sand. That's what that margin is. It's a line between where you write on a notebook paper and where you don't write on a notebook paper. It's a line you won't cross, and you just have to be resolved, back to our word, to not do that. Define that. And if you need help defining it, get some help. Whether you're a small business owner, reach out to the people you need there, or if it's your personal finances, get a financial advisor to help you create that margin.
Scott, I would say that you go back to that song, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I think that this has the ability, if it has not killed your business, if you're not out of business, it has the ability to make your business stronger. And I think that's how you win in this situation. I think you come out of this in the long term and look back and go, we are a better company. We are better in our personal finances because we've gone through this and because we've made the adoptions and the adaptions that we needed to make to get through this. That's how you find victory in this, is that you become stronger and you become better because of how you've adapted.
I'm going to use a Johnism for my final thought.
A
It
Johnism.
is a Johnism. It is fend for yourself, but don't go it alone. Yes, you bear the responsibility of your business, and you've got to handle that. But whether it is reaching out to other business owners to seek wise counsel or reaching out to an advisor to seek wise counsel, don't go it alone.
You can call 501-653-7355 to set an appointment with a Gen Wealth advisor. We are out of time. Thanks for listening and watching. We'll talk to you next week.
The Gen Wealth Financial Team is available to you 24/7 at info@getreadyforthefuture.com or call our offices at 501-653-7355. You should personally consult a financial advisor before making any investment, and no strategy can assure success. Gen Wealth Financial Advisors is an Arkansas-registered investment advisor with securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC.